Hello, my friends at TPL Media. Yes, check us out at tplmedia.ca or subscribe and like wherever you're getting this content. It has been just over a week since Pierre Poilievre was on Joe Rogan. And there's mixed feelings. Oh my goodness. If you listen to the mainstream media, they think it was a bad decision. If you listen to the comment section, they think this was the greatest thing since sliced bread. To discuss this with me, I could only bring in the number one TPL media host, Shaliza. Welcome.
Hey, Bradie.
Let's talk some Joe Rogan.
Wow. I actually do think overall it was a good move. Regardless of what your political stance is, who you support, I think even though Joe Rogan's American, and we'll get into that in a bit, I do think the exposure that this gave Pierre Poilievre and the Conservative Party may have actually benefited him.
I think you are hitting that right on the head, because I think it doesn't matter what your political stance is. We had a Canadian, I guess, prime minister in waiting. We had a Canadian, one of the biggest Canadians ever, on the biggest platform ever, and he got to speak his mind for over 2 hours. What that content was, we'll break down during the show, but I love to see that. And I would have loved to see Mark Carney in that position, even though I'm not a Mark Carney guy.
Yeah.
I would have loved to see that. I would like to see Donald Trump, even though I'm not for or against Donald Trump. I like when I see any of these people that you don't normally see in a long form conversation where it's not relying on sound bites and lobbyists and trying to make your corporate sponsors happy or your party affiliates, et cetera, et cetera. So great stuff right from the beginning. I love how we opened up the show and didn't talk about anything Canada. He just talked about kettleballs and whatever else he was trying to plug. Yeah. But there's some things that came from this that I actually have negatives about.
Okay, tell me.
So I'll start off by saying I don't think it was a great idea to say the only reason he was in politics is because he had tendonitis.
That was weird.
It's a weird move to make. And if it's the truth, thank you for being honest. But all that does is give ammo to the house that's against you, because the very first thing we heard the following week after, when Pierre was in the house, was, well, you wouldn't even be here if you didn't get a sports injury, so we shouldn't be listening to you. I think those kind of things, he gave a lot of ammo to the opposition. And I think that's the very first negative that I have.
Yeah, and I think another thing was, I think often when you're a politician, you just have to put on that mask all the time. And I think this was a little bit of him loosening up. So we got to see a little bit more of his personality than we usually would see. If
that's him loosening up, I would never want to see him stiff, because, man, I feel like he was sitting on a pickle the whole time. I mean,
for who he is and what he represents, I do think generally he's a pretty good speaker, I think. And in that sense, I do think he's stronger than Mark Carney in that way. So I think that's why he was kind of quote unquote successful doing this podcast. But I don't know, something about it just kind of drew me to him. And like I said, regardless of what party you support or who you would support in an upcoming election, I do think it sort of magnetized him a little bit. It just showed another side of him that we wouldn't usually see if he's sitting in the House or making an address in front of Canadians.
You know, people say that he's got that kind of cultish personality building, right, in Canada, and that he has a lot of charisma. I don't know if he has a lot of charisma.
I think Riz. That's what the kids say. I had to do it.
I know I look like a child, but looks are deceiving. I am not a child. I don't know what Riz means, but
well, now you know.
I know now. So he's got the Riz. And, it may look like he has Riz if you compare him to Mark Carney. Mark Carney's a very intellectual man. He's a very soft-spoken man, but he's cookie-cutter potato style. He's very boring, right, for the youth. I can only imagine a young person, if you put both of these guys on platforms and you had them talking beside each other, people are always going to gravitate probably towards Pierre's energy, even if you don't agree with him. The energy seems to be there. But I think that's weak energy to begin with. I do not think Pierre really is as cunning as people say he is. I think he's got a smirk. I think he says some snarmy things that make him sound like he's kind of sarcastic, which could be translated into either confidence or it can be translated into charisma. I think he's a smoke and mirrors act, and I'm going to break that down throughout this. So my first negative was he gave ammo to the opposition. My second negative is I don't know if he actually knows anything about MMA.
Why do you say that?
Well, the person, if you listen to Joe Rogan and you listen to Pierre, the person who got this relationship built and who got that interview set up and arranged it was George St-Pierre, who's a very famous Canadian MMA fighter, one of the greatest fighters of all time. But he had no idea who GSP's coach was.
I don't either, so...
No, I know that, but you don't claim to be a big, giant MMA fan as far as I know, right? So if you know that the number one gym in Canada is in Montreal and it's called TriStar, and GSP came from there, and Firas Zahabi, his coach, you would know these things if you paid attention even for a second. I think Pierre got a bit of a... On the plane ride, he read some MMA facts. He looked at what was most recent, talked about some of that. He's a very casual, at best, casual fan of MMA.
Yeah.
And that's the impression that I got because I do a radio show about MMA. So I can tell when people are casuals and I can tell when people actually know what they're talking about. I thought that was my second negative. Do you have any negatives?
I think it was just maybe the subject matter of the entire conversation. I mean, I don't know. I think it has me wondering what he was trying to prove and what he was trying to do with this by going on an American podcast. Like, why Joe Rogan? I understand the connection, obviously, that you just mentioned, but it's like, you are running for the leader of Canada. You would want to be the leader of Canada one day. So why wouldn't you keep that north of the border? What did he gain from doing this? And like I said, Joe Rogan is obviously internationally acclaimed, internationally recognized. So obviously there are people in Canada who watch him, but I think my most negative thing was it's just not keeping it 100% Canadian.
Can I counter?
Of course.
What platform would he used in Canada had eyes as big as Rogan?
Well, TPL Media.
Well, we're 2 years out from that, though. So in 2 years from now, yes, that's right. Right? Even in maybe a year, if we have a good run. So we've been doing so well so far. But what other platform, right? I don't know if there is another platform that he would have been given 2.5 hours on that would have had that many eyes.
That is a very good question. And that also like brings up the idea of what does media look like in Canada versus the US, and why don't we have what they have, for lack of a better term? Like, why don't we have those podcasts that are, homegrown, reach a lot of people, become a household name? What are we doing in Canada?
Well, we audit the living crap out of them now. They just made that announcement that if a podcast company does over 10 million in revenue or has $10 million in business, they now have to be part of the government system, et cetera, et cetera. So our government works very hard on shutting down independent media. So I think that's probably why.
I mean, yeah.
I don't know if there could be a platform that big. Like,
I know. I mean, I could only hope so. I mean,
I'm trying to think. Like,
I mean, either I'm drawing a blank.
Yeah, what podcaster in Canada?
But maybe
actually has a massive base.
That's true, and maybe it would have been. You know what I think it is though? I think it's content creators in Canada who have
content and influencers.
Yeah.
And you're not going to have a 2.5 hour conversation with an influencer, because if you do, they're going to be like, "That's how I do my Botox. That's how I do my fella." Or there's going to be some guy being like, "You see how big my arms are, Pierre? It's because I'm in the gym every day. Like, working out."
I don't discount their intelligence, though.
That's how Canadians talk, right?
I think they're smarter than you think, bud.
Maybe. I don't watch a lot of influencers. I deleted almost everything off my social media except for Instagram.
Did you?
Yeah.
But it still bleeds onto there.
I know, it does a little bit. But I get a lot of puppy dogs. And a lot of card videos. I've nurtured my algorithm. Just a lot of puppy dogs.
So then what do you think he needs to do next? What position do you think that this actually put Pierre in? Is he possibly going to be ahead of Carney in the upcoming polls in an upcoming election? Where do you think this puts him in? Is this going to be remembered by Canadians down the road?
I think he resonates more with the younger crowd, the 35 and under crowd. I think definitely tuned into that. And I would assume that they watched most of it. I think the hunters and trappers and fishers and athletes and all of the off to the side people, I guarantee that they enjoyed it and they got what they wanted out of it. I've heard a lot of people say that he should have used that platform, that American platform, to speak only about Canada and the things that could benefit his actual party and his campaign and things like that. I understand where that mentality is coming from, but I do not know if that's what Joe Rogan is.
Yeah.
I think Joe Rogan is supposed to be a conversation with people who have either high status or educational backgrounds or whatever it is. They come from all these different places and genres, but they all do the same thing, which is just have a 2.5 hour casual conversation. And some of their issues get brought up, but a lot of the time they're just shooting the crap about chimpanzees or something, right?
But I do also think this changed maybe Americans' perception of what Canadian politics look like.
I agree, big time.
Because you've got Pierre, who is the leader of the party, which you would compare most to the Republican Party in the US. So he's maybe calling him Canada's Trump. And I think, is Trumpism the right term to use? I think that's like an accepted term now, right? I feel like we've adapted some of that. And a lot of people expect Pierre Poilievre to be this villain the way that Trump is portrayed, or is, for we'll just put that out there.
There's two different types of TDS. There's Trump derangement syndrome, and then there's Trump delusion syndrome. So I like to fall in the middle.
Okay.
Where I just, I don't really buy into what the media tells me. I form my own opinions.
But not everybody's like that, right?
Yeah. No, you're right.
So I'm wondering if this has kind of opened a lot of Americans' eyes also, like kind of put a spotlight on Canadian politics to say, hey, you know what, maybe this guy isn't quite what Trump is, and maybe Canadian politics aren't directly mirroring what's going on in the U.S.
And as a Canadian, it felt very good to hear him say the 51st state thing's a joke. Like he laughed it off, right? He's like, if you just thought about it for a second, it's impossible. It's not going to happen.
It's not happening.
It's not going to happen. So good on him for doing that. And good on him for going in and talking about MMA. He was trying to relate to Joe. I understand what was going on there. And maybe I'm completely wrong. Maybe he's the biggest MMA fan ever. He just has a really bad brain. But I still feel like there's more negatives than positives. I love the fact that he said that he is basically the prime minister in waiting. No, because that's actually true. That is the role that the opposition does have. It was nice that he clarified that. He clarified how democracy works inside of the monarchy. I really like that he did that. But I don't like the kettlebell stuff. I do not like the MMA stuff. I think you could spend 15 minutes on that. And we actually have the craziest team ever here that broke this whole thing down in terms of like time wasted and how much time was spent on a certain subject, et cetera, et cetera. But instead of going through that whole thing, because this is a textbook, I've gotten some of that information lined up for later on. But the headline of what they put together after crunching all of this and saying, here is the title that Pierre should have outside of this. If we were going to base his whole titles off of everything that he talked about in Joe Rogan. So we have professional fight analyst. He's a kettlebell historian. He's the official opposition to the 51st state narrative, and he is the syrup sommelier.
Ooh, I like that.
The maple syrup sommelier.
I like that. Can I get that on a t-shirt?
You can have that.
I will take that. I will come in next time with that on a shirt.
Better now. You can't make promises. So, yeah, he wasted a lot of time talking about non-Canadian issues. If you look at those things, like that was a waste of time. Like I said, I'm kind of in a weird boat here. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the entire thing from start to finish. Do I think it could have been better? Yes. Could he have addressed more Canadian topics? Yes. But I don't know if that's what this was.
Okay, so tell me about that. You just said you watched it start to finish, right?
Yeah.
It's 2.5 hours. Most people, and especially the major demographic who Pierre Poilievre appeals to, do not have the attention span for that. Right? No, I'm serious. I include myself in that as well. Okay. It takes a lot for me to sit there and watch a 2.5 hour podcast or listen to a 2.5 hour podcast. I'll tell you that.
I love how you sat yourself in that seat beside them.
Hey, I'm honest.
I'm just saving myself here again.
I'm honest. So my question is this long form? I mean, and we produce long form content here at TPL. Follow us at TPL Media. But is that actually effective? Did he actually get some sort of message across? Because honestly, to me, and I think you touched on this a little bit, it really just felt like he was shooting it.
He was shooting it.
Right?
Yeah.
He wasn't really trying to get any particular message across. Yeah. So what was the point of it?
So let's 180 then, because you're right. He was shooting it. And what was the point? The point was to show that he's a human. That's what I feel like his team put together. We need to show people that you're not just talking in sound bites, that you're not just chomping on an apple and being an arrogant butt, right? You're not just talking about foam on the top of a Guinness on St. Paddy's Day or whatever he's doing, these little, niche little commercials that he's doing, that he's an actual human being. So let's say that you took Mark Carney and put him in that position. And it was 2.5 hours. It would all be about Canada.
Yes.
None of it would have anything to do with about being person.
I hope that he would come on there wearing the fleece from the Heated Rivalry show that he was gifted as well. That's a conversation for another day.
You are a troll. You just want to see Rogan say, what are you wearing? Where did that come from? How did we get here? Because that's a half an hour conversation in itself.
That's exactly what I was thinking. But I will say, if I were to compare Mark Carney and Pierre Poilievre, I really and truly do think Pierre Poilievre is a little more well-spoken than Mark Carney.
Okay.
You know, Mark Carney's a good guy.
Look, what do you mean by well-spoken? Like,
I think he gets
educated or just
I think
silver spoon vernacular?
Yes, that. I think they're both equally just as intelligent, just as educated. I'm not trying to smack anybody's intelligence down.
No, I'm just trying to understand because I'm not intelligent.
But if honestly, if I were to try and have a conversation with Mark Carney, I feel like I'd be trying to pull a little bit more out of him. Whereas with Poilievre, I think it comes out a little bit more naturally. So I'm wondering if anybody would watch a 2.5 hour podcast with Mark Carney. It might get a little monotone.
I'd watch it from start to finish. I'd be pulling my eyebrows out, my eyelashes the whole time because like I said, I think he would go in there with a pre-written 2.5 hour script about Canada, and it would only be about Canada. And Joe would say, well, who's your favorite fighter? And he's like, anyone who fights for Canada, elbows up. Right, or whatever, he would just spin it because he's a banker and a politician, right? Like, and he's very dry. So if you want that whole leader going on and talking about Canada for 2.5 hours, you'd get that out of Mark Carney. I don't think you'd get through it. Like you said, I don't know if start to beginning would even be a thing.
So you know what this also makes me think about? Do you remember when Trudeau did that whole U.S. media run? And was it Kimmel or Fallon? Which one was it? I can't remember now, but he did some late night shows, and I have to say I enjoyed it.
Okay, why?
And I feel like it was very similar to what Poilievre is trying to do, but maybe reaching a different audience. This was putting Canada on the map, and obviously his looks overshadowed everything because everybody who's not from Canada was like, "Oh my God, I didn't know Canada's prime minister was so good looking."
He's not even that good looking.
He's pretty good looking.
Oh, come on.
He's pretty good. He's dating Katy Perry, man. I mean, he's
she's
doing
not very
something
good looking
right.
either. Got that wonky eye. Have you ever seen that video?
Yes, yeah, I have. I hope we got a close up of that.
We did. No, I know what you're saying. I guess Justin was easy on the eyes to some ladies, and this is why I don't understand men and women and people who like guys like that. My short little self will sit over here. I was never a boxer or a drama teacher, so I don't have that background. But yeah, so Justin, I get it. Yeah, Justin had a little bit more personality. You're right. If he went on to meetings and he went into conversations, they were a little bit more Justin-based. You're not going to get that out of Mark Carney. We're getting a board. He's as stiff as a board, and that's what we'd get. So, but people didn't like Justin either.
I mean, I think when you're
even liberals didn't like Justin.
When you're a politician, people will always find things that they don't like about you.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I think that's something you just have to face no matter what. It doesn't matter who the next prime minister of Canada is, if Carney continues or if Poilievre takes that. Mm-hmm. There's going to be people who don't like you. And I think they're just doing the best that they can to appeal to the people that they can. And I also want to bring this back to a lot of people, a lot of MPs and things switching positions, switching sides, right? We're seeing a lot of them going from Poilievre's side over to Carney's side, going over to the Liberals. So, if Poilievre wants to go on an American podcast and do that, that's great. But that doesn't stop what's happening here in Canada.
You're right.
So I think maybe you need to take a look at what's going on with your own party, with the people that you have to work with on a daily basis, and try to keep your party strong.
You know what? I can't wait. I can't wait for the new Canadian party that starts for that leader to go on Joe Rogan, because we'll get an actual, real conversation from somebody who's trying to make a difference. Because even this morning, as we're recording this, we had an announcement from Ford, Carney, and Olivia Chow, all from Rexdale, from this area, just outside of where we're shooting. And they're all supposed to be opposing, apparently. Yep. And somehow they're all sitting there laughing together to the point where Ford goes to take a drink of Mark Carney's water, and he goes, well, if I drink this, will I become liberal? Ha, 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 ha. Which shows you the same thing that I learned from a very good friend who used to be a chef at the Parliament buildings. This is all the same political bird. We need a new party in Canada because these guys are way too friendly behind the scenes and way too angry in front of the scenes, when in reality, it's all just a giant ruse.
But my thing is, we have other parties in Canada. The Liberals and the Conservatives are not the only two parties. So why...
Are you saying that's the NDP, though?
Yeah, I mean, yes.
The NDP is just a liberal cuck.
I agree and I disagree because, we see some similarities and some differences. And I mean, we could go into policy and all of that as well.
Which I'm going to try and not drag this into. I don't want to get you into it. I feel bad. We're supposed to be talking about the show itself, but I'll drag it through politics. This is True Patriot Law.
I mean, it is after all. Yeah. But what would a new party actually do? Because would that still not distract, but take away from it being basically a run between the Liberals and the Conservatives? Would a new party actually change that?
It could if we get rid of the actual corruption. So if we remove things like people having the ability to cross floors and manipulate voting power and things like that, if we could figure all that out, then yes, a new party would make a difference. But if a new party coming in right now with a very light plan and not having their boots on the ground and letting this group control voting and things like that, I don't think it's going to find the room. We've had reform parties. We've had numerous parties. If you go out to Calgary, we were out in Alberta, they have more political parties out there than they know what to do with. I think there's 14 active ones right now. And sorry if I'm wrong on that quote, but there was by the time we went out there in January. So there's a lot of political parties in Canada, but none of them actually have any boots on the ground that that can make a big difference. Mm-hmm. We need one. Because if that leader went on Joe Rogan and said, hey, this is a new platform in Canada, and we're doing things this way, and I'm here to tell you not only who I am, but what I want to do for this country. Thank you for giving me your platform to do that. That's when I think going on Rogan makes a change. But if we keep sending the same groups of people with the same mentality that are at the same parties that are telling us to stay home and not visit our family during pandemic times and all these things, this doesn't make a difference. This doesn't make a difference with voting. What this does is what you said from the very beginning. Makes the Americans look at us a little bit differently. And if that's the only positive that came out of this, then I'll take the rest of the negatives happy. Because I know that I look in the comment section and a lot of Americans are saying, I don't want to fight with you. We shouldn't have a tariff war. Like these are our friends. These are our neighbors. We were always so good to each other. Why are we fighting now? And if him going on there at least created that conversation for Americans to maybe take a step back and say, holy crap, I don't hate Canadians. And it makes Canadians take a step back and say, holy crap, I don't hate Americans. These are our brothers. At the end of the day, we're all human beings anyway.
Agreed.
But if we're not going to look at it that way, and we're going to look at it like, well, you're only, as good as the neighbor that you have.
I mean, hey, I think he took a W with the fact that Donald Trump didn't go write a paragraph on X about it.
I was worried.
So, I mean, I guess he did something right.
I was worried that Truth Social was going to be blown up all night with dementia-ridden crazy. I'm just joking. But crazy rants about how Canada shouldn't be, on Joe Rogan and shouldn't be talked about. He didn't do any of that. He didn't do any of that. We got a very nice positive response from our American friends that have been looking at us very negatively for the past 6 months.
So I think it does create some sort of understanding. But at the same time, those Americans aren't the ones who are voting up here in Canada.
You're right. Well, if you're voting, you know what to do. Get a new party. No, I'm just joking. I love the fact that Shaliza sat down and talked to me about Pierre on Joe Rogan. I don't know who else would actually do it. I asked everybody in the back, and they all said, no, Bradie, you're too crazy. Shaliza likes sitting down with crazy. We'll put her with you. Thank you very much, Shaliza, for talking about Pierre on Joe Rogan. Do you have anything else that you want to say before we get out of here?
Elbows up.
Patriotic means looking out for each other and fixing things together.
True patriotism is being in the country you love, surrounded by people you love, and great weather.
Being a patriot is being a part of your community and caring for it.
It doesn't matter who you are or where you're from. Patriotism is the one thing we all share.
It's okay to be critical of government and still be a patriot.
It's gratitude to your country.
Of course I'm a patriot. I'm Canadian. It's my home.
Well, actually, true patriot love is the mission.